I do apologize for that, but I wanted to explore an idea that doesn't explain my need to inflict it upon you, the listeners. But I have also. It doesn't contain any explicit sex. Truth is, I've been enjoying a happier place telling love story. Still, the itch needs to be scratched, and I often wonder what form of revenge brings any real measure of satisfaction. I honestly don't know the answer to that question, although I am repeatedly drawn to that utility knife I employed in A Carpenter's Best Friend. I like revenge that isn't life-threatening and that doesn't get you arrested, but is horribly humiliating for the cheater because humiliation is what the betrayed spouse feels. Despite that, there is no real physical revenge in this story. I suppose this effort is part story and part travelogue. I started thinking of driving cross-country as a metaphor for moving on in life. I realized that no matter how far we go to escape our lives, we carry those lives with us. I became a shit down, and getting out and about became an almost exotic dream. Anyway, this is a story about a man betrayed who ghosts his marriage. My name is Andrew Baker. My friends call me App, but never Andy. There is always some obnoxious drunk, some jackass who doesn't know me and wants to be more familiar than he deserves. And he'll always call me Andy. So, Annie, what do you do for a living? I tell him I build a neat little device that cops can just point at you from 40 feet away and tell if you're drunk. They've started attaching them to radar guns around town. That usually shuts them up. Although if you haven't guessed it yet, that device doesn't really exist. I guess you can tell that I don't suffer fools very well. Lie to me and it gets worse. I'm not a complicated man. In fact, I like a simple life. I enjoy my work. I'm an engineer with a large national company that has many branch offices across the country. I have friends. I don't drink much, but I'll have the occasional beer. Truth be told, I prefer the nachos. But that's my struggle. If I let it get out of control, I'll put on weight. I need to keep that beast at bay, so I struggle and stay in reasonable shape for a man my age. I used to sail every chance I got, but a wife and 2 baby girls can put demands on a man's time. And I soon sold the boat. That's just one of life's little sacrifices that I made years ago. And I made it happily so I'd have the time to spend with the people that matter to me. I've been happily married to Karen, a high school teacher, for 25 years. Our 2 girls are both in college now. Claire is up in Rhode Island at Brown, and her younger sister Denise is at Boston University. I doubt I could afford schools like that, but the girls are serious students and earn some exceptional scholarship. We live in North Carolina in an area they call the Research Triangle. It's built on several very good universities in the Raleigh area with top-flight high-tech firms all around. It's a great place to live and work. I tell you about Carolina barbecue, but I'll just get hungry thinking about it. I was more than a little disappointed when the girls chose to go north for college, but I guess they needed to spread their wings a little. And in the long run, that's a good thing. The girls are great. They're smart, funny, personable, young women with a strong sense of right and wrong. I worry about their safety every day, but I don't worry about their choices. Seeing them raised and taking those first steps of independence meant that my wife and I would finally have time for ourselves again. I'd been looking forward to these days for some time with both girls off at college. I had fantasies of coming home every night to a loving wife who poured her attention onto me and mine onto her until life was one joyful day after another. We could be like newlyweds again. We would go out to dinner, see plates, go to movies, and finally reconnect the way I'd always wanted. It didn't work out quite that way. Truth be told, over that first year of our empty nest, Karen started changing her interests, were moving away from me, or so it seemed. It was gradual, but over time it could be seen. I wrote it off as her chance to blossom now that the girls had moved out. But eventually I realized that what I was watching was a fundamental change in her values and priorities. Karen teaches English with an emphasis on creative writing. To be honest, and I hope fair, she is a frustrated writer. As a young mother and teacher, she never had the time to write the way she wanted. Karen writes all summer long and whenever she can spare an hour or two. But nothing much has ever come of it. She would regularly submit essays and short stories to literary magazines, developing only an extensive collection of rejection letters while the masterwork never materialized. If I were truthful, I do love to read what my wife writes, but as a writer, she's never reached beyond formulaic and often melodramatic tales. She has a romantic idea of what a writer is supposed to be, and I suspect not that I would ever tell her that she is drawn more to the idea of being a writer than to the writing itself. No matter if she's happy, I'm happy for most of our marriage. Karen has belonged to one writing group or another. These are people who get together for the purpose of helping each other, critiquing, suggesting, and discussing their work in an effort to make each other better. Some of the groups have seemed to me to be genuinely productive, while others are more like mutual admiration society. Her last group, which was her current group when it all fell apart, had a bit of both. They took turns meeting at each other's home, and when they were here, I tried to make myself scarce. I did try to participate once, but that got me some disapproving looks from Karen and a few others, so I gave up trying. Karen's current writing group has about 10 people with both men and women. I like some of them. Others I could live without. Half are known to script and half make a very definite impression when you meet them. Reggie, a woman, is heavy into writing histories and biographies. She does real research and writes books that have a strong academic vein while still trying to engage the reader. I have read them all and I like them a lot. I've told her so. Betty likes to write fantasy. I don't think she imagines herself the next J.K. Rowling. She's more the talking unicorn type, but she's pleasant and she seems to write mostly for her own pleasure. Who can fault that? Bill is the resident know-it-all. A little of that can go a long way, but he seems okay in every other regard. Then there's Frank. I heard alarms in my head the first time I met him, and those alarms have not stopped sounding since when I was introduced to Frank. And I was most definitely made to feel that I was being introduced to him and not the other way around. He said, "So, Annie, what do you do?" I looked at my wife, who pursed her lips and shook her head at me, and I just said, "Engineer Frank." Was that a smile or a smirk he gave me? I told you that I gave up trying to participate in their group, but I tend to be more out of sight and out of mind, but not out of sound. When they come over, I'll be in the next room working quietly or on the back porch with an open window until they forget I'm there. I noticed early on that when Frank interacts with Karen, it's almost like they have their own private jokes. Sometimes he inflates her ego, and other times he seems to know her thoughts with an intimacy that I don't care for one little bit. He makes references to past conversations, and I get the impression the rest of the group has no memory of them. It's just a feeling. But I don't like it, and I've told her so. She just dismisses my concerns, and I know better than to push it. I've made sure she knows how I feel about it. The rest is on her. The group has a pattern to their meetings after the working session. The group settles down with some wine and loosens up. That's when I learned that some of them are just pretenders. It was the middle of the spring semester, early March, when the conversation turned to the lifestyle of real writers. All the great writers were alcoholics. True, they write in the mornings and drink in the afternoons and evenings. It loosens up the brain to new ideas, and then in the mornings their creative juices flow and they write. Actually, the truly great writers all had love affairs. That was their real.